Welcome to Seen and Heard, a blog and podcast about evangelism, missions, and multiplication. Evangelism, isolation, and the coronavirus. March 17th, 2020. Everyone's writing about it, scared of it, angered by it, and doing it all at home because they probably shouldn't go anywhere right now. The coronavirus is affecting everyone in all sorts of ways, some of which we are probably not yet aware of. But the one obvious new reality is this: isolation. It doesn't matter whether you believe isolation or social distancing is the correct response or not. Schools are still closed, and gatherings are still canceled or banned altogether. This is something that everyone is navigating. Many have already given good guidance to churches and Christians about how to respond well during a pandemic. Everyone will have their own convictions, contexts, and responses. The question we will ask here is, what does the coronavirus mean for our evangelism? It would seem that isolation and social distancing would be contrary to evangelism. They are certainly hurdles. How can we continue to be evangelistic during a pandemic? How can we be active, intentional witnesses of Jesus Christ in a moment of heightened isolation and social avoidance? Canceling Sunday morning gatherings for a few weeks cannot mean that we put off proclaiming Christ to our friends and neighbors for any amount of time. There is always an urgency to share the gospel. In times of crisis, that urgency may only increase. So how can we do evangelism well when the world is avoiding us? Yes, they've always avoided us, but now they might have a valid reason. Here are 4 ways that we can do evangelism during a pandemic. Let's have more than a right attitude towards the virus. Let's have the right actions. Let's be doers. 1. Get our message straight. Okay, maybe this first one isn't really an action, but more like a way to prepare. Remember that our mouth speaks from the overflow of our hearts, Luke 6:45. So let's be careful of our message. What is the Christian message to a world in fear? I can assure you that it is not, "Don't be afraid." That was Jesus' message to his disciples who had, quote, little faith, Matthew 8:26. To a world without faith, fear makes perfect sense. As people of peace, we should be careful not to ignore, dismiss, or angrily criticize the cautions of others while expecting that they should stop being afraid. Biblically, they have every reason to be afraid. What our neighbors need to hear is not calm down or stop fearing sickness. Instead, it is this: he was despised and rejected by men, a man of suffering who knew what sickness was. He was like someone people turned away from. He was despised and we didn't value him. Yet he himself bore our sicknesses, and he carried our pains. But we in turn regarded him stricken, struck down by God and afflicted. But he was pierced because of our rebellion, crushed because of our iniquities. Punishment for our peace was on him, and we are healed by his wounds. Isaiah 53, 3-5. The message we offer to a world in fear is also not politically charged. It does not assign blame to a particular ideology, media outlet, or conspiracy theory. Hold those views if you must, and be a good, active citizen in the election process when the time comes. But Christian, the reason you aren't panicking is not because of fake news. It is because you belong to a Lord and Savior who has overcome the very sin and suffering that you experience and contribute to, and you are hopeful for his return. Jesus said, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in the world. Be courageous. I have conquered the world." John 16:33. Until then, everyone is asking, what's wrong with the world today? And rather than rattling off every failed policy or politician, maybe we can learn to respond like G.K. Chesterton. Whether or not this quote can be verified is beyond me. The legend of it is good enough. His response when asked what is wrong with the world was this: "Dear sir, I am yours, G.K. Chesterton." 2. Pursue people. We already neglect evangelism. God forbid we use a pandemic as an excuse to avoid redemptive relationships and gospel conversations. If we are to be ready in season and out of season, then we must pursue people in times of peace or pandemic. When our friends and neighbors begin retreating to their homes, we ought to chase them. Of course, I don't mean literally. I mean that it should be difficult for our neighbors to spend several weeks or months in their homes without ever hearing from us or even, hopefully, seeing us. We mustn't stop pursuing people. Thank God that he didn't stop pursuing us when we were struck by the pandemic of sin. Of course, to pursue anyone in this environment will take some creativity. It might actually be quite unloving to show up at a neighbor's door expecting a long conversation. Why not utilize the incredible connectivity of the world we live in and pick up the phone? Call people. Check on them. Ask if you can help. Make sure your neighbors know that they can contact you if they need anything. Arrange a virtual coffee hangout with a coworker. Don't spend more time mindlessly scrolling through Facebook and Instagram. Make the extra effort to connect with someone meaningfully. Go for a walk. Be seen by your neighbors and ask them how they are doing. Stand 6 feet away if you have to, but make the effort to pursue people. 3. Pray for people and let them know. Hopefully, every Christian article you've read about the coronavirus has included an exhortation to fervent, intentional prayer. Pray for our elected leaders. Pray for our churches. Pray for the sick and the scared. Pray for healing and for peace. Don't pray to be seen. Jesus clearly warned against that, but pray, and while you do, let your neighbors know. The coronavirus is dominating everyone's newsfeed, which makes it an easy topic of conversation. And though we had reason to care before, this crisis should make for easy opportunities to express concern for our neighbors. Ask them how they are doing. More pointedly, ask them, how can I pray for you and your family right now? Notice that's a bit more direct than the barely genuine way that many of us manage an I'll pray for you. Ask someone how you can pray for them. Cause them to think about what they might ask for if they prayed. 4. Ask bigger questions. Crises like this one are difficult for many people because of the difficult realities that confront them. Sickness and death are two of the most uncertain realities we face in this broken world, and Christians are no strangers to this trouble. We have our own experiences and our own worries to share. They may even play a part in the testimony of God's saving grace in our life. We don't need to be doomsday announcers, but we should find this as an opportunity to ask bigger questions. Why do you think people are so scared? Is sickness and death something you worry about? What do you think about death? Is isolation difficult for you? Why? Evangelism in isolation. During this unique time, as we seek the well-being of our families, churches, and communities, let's not forget the mission of Christ and His church. We are to be His witnesses, here, there, and everywhere. Acts 1:8. The Great Commission doesn't take a back seat while we wait for the pandemic to pass. We might need to get creative, but with the right message on our lips, we can always pursue people, pray for them, and ask bigger questions. Remember, successful evangelism should be measured by how quickly and clearly the gospel message is going out. We mustn't allow the coronavirus to silence that message, even for a short time. All for the glory of King Jesus, who knows our sickness and bore our sickness and left our sickness in the grave.